Okay, so we're going to see how we can take a dull, flat sounding snare recording and bring it to a place where it sounds polished, smacky, and got plenty of weight to it, and sounds like a record. So this is a snare that was recorded in less than ideal way. The miking was not great, and the room it was recorded in did not have a great sound to it. In fact, it was a very deadened sounding room. And so the playing is amazing. It's great playing, but it's just the sound of the recording that's not that great. And so it really needed to be brought to something a lot more polished. So let's have a listen to this snare as it came in. This is just the close mic snare, and then we'll listen to it with the overheads, because half of the sound of the snare is in the overheads and the other half is in the close mic. So, and this snare has two mics, a bottom and a top, and we'll talk about that later, but there's a blend of those two coming into one group channel for the snare. And we're going to have just a listen to that. A blend of the top and bottom mic, a blend that I thought sounded like as good as it was going to get. So let's have a listen to that without any processing. So pretty dull sounding. Let's listen to it now with the whole drum kit, because then we'll get the overheads as well, and you can hear how it sounds with the overheads. So it sounds better, but still kind of dull sounding. So I'll play it again, and now I'm going to bring in some reverb and also the main processing on the snare. And now let's bring the bass in, so some context. So you can hear in the context of the bass and the piano, that snare needs to cut through. And now that we've got the processing in, it's cutting through nicely, and it's sounding nice and polished. It's got a nice smack to it. It's got weight and drive to it. Let's take the processing back out and have another listen. I'll leave the reverb in, but I'm just going to take out the other processing. you can hear a number of things when the processing comes in. First of all, you can hear how much interaction there is, in this case, between the snare and the piano. They're very much like having a conversation, and all those fast little rolls are playing in with the piano, what the piano's doing, and they're kind of like, you know, trading back and forth, or even playing at the same time, similar kind of rhythmic patterns with each other. And that's a key part of the dialogue that's going on in this music. So you really need to be able to hear that, and that's true of a lot of jazz. It's the details are so important. A lot of the improvisation is in the details of what everybody's doing and how everybody's reacting off what everybody else is doing. All those little conversations going on, musical conversations. So without the processing, you can hear what's going on, but it's not as easy to hear it. With the processing, you can hear it a lot better. With the processing, there's way more energy, and there's way more impact, and there's more weight to the sound. So let's have a look and see how I've done that. And before I do that, I'm just going to put a final bit of processing in there just to give it a little bit of final bit of polish. So you can hear, again, I took it in and out, and I brought in that final little extra bit of polish. You can hear the difference. It sounds much more like a record and ready to go than it did coming in. So let's look at what I did. Creating these videos takes significant time and effort. Supporters of the channel make it possible for me to continue to make more. If you find these videos useful and interesting, I invite you to support the channel. There are a range of things you can do. You can make a direct donation of any amount, become a monthly patron, buy some of my music, or buy some merchandise. I also have a range of courses available that cover all essential aspects of mixing, from getting started right up to advanced techniques. Links to everything are in the video description below. And finally, click that like and subscribe button. Thanks. I'm going to go back to soloing the snare on its own, keeping in mind that this is only half the sound and the other half is in the overheads. So we started with an EQ here. Now what I'm doing here is I'm pulling away everything under 170 hertz. Why? Because there's a lot of kick drum coming through, because though it was mic'd, you're hearing a lot of kick. Too much. And I didn't find that was helping the sound. If it sounded good with it in there, it would fine. I'd leave it in there. But partly because I knew I needed to do quite a bit of processing to get it to where it needed to go, and also because I didn't like the sound of what the kick was doing through there. You know, it's got a kick drum mic. I don't really need to hear a kind of bad version of the kick drum coming through the snare. Now, that's a whole philosophy of drum miking. And my philosophy on drum miking is having spill between the drum mics is absolutely fine if it sounds good. And that has a lot to do with the room. If you've got a great sounding room, then you want that spill to come through, because all of the resonances and nice sound is all going to come through, and you get this really nice addition of spill coming through, and it can sound really great. If you don't have any kind of nice room sound, like we don't in this case, and what you actually have is a kind of lesser version of the kick drum, a kind of not very nice sounding kick drum sound. Have a listen. I'm going to take the processing out and just have a listen to the kick drum coming through the snare mic. So that's with no processing. So you can hear, you know, that's not a great kick drum sound. And we've got a nice kick drum sound coming out of the kick drum mic. So why do I want that? You know, it doesn't add to it. It might add to it in some circumstances. In this case, it really didn't. So this is why I brought in, first of all, this EQ. So let's just have a listen to that in and out so you can hear what that does. So start with that out. You really don't need that kick. Now I could pull this down a bit more and get a little bit more low end on the snare, and I might decide to do that. I don't think it really needs it, but in some settings I probably would do that, because sometimes you really kind of need that kind of low end to the snare. In this case, with all of the stuff going on in this, I don't really feel it was going to help particularly. So, but that's an option. You could pull it back a little bit. So what next? Next we've got EQ. Now, I could have done all the EQ with this clean Kirchhoff EQ, but I like to use SSL for drums. And the reason for that is because let's make this a bit bigger here. The reason is because it has a sound to it. And this particular one from Waves, I think sounds really great. I've also got 4 other versions, I think, 3, 4 other versions. The other one I really like is the Plugin Alliance one. Also sounds great. This is an E series, and so is I've got a Plugin Alliance E series, but they sound different. Very similar, but not exactly the same. And I think this one just sounds great on drums. Sometimes I use the Plugin Alliance, sometimes I use this one. In this case, I got a slightly better result with this one. But the other might be true on another track. It might be the Plugin Alliance one. But I generally just start with one, and if I can't get there, I'll jump over to the other one. So what am I doing here? I'm going to bring this in and out so you can hear. I'm going to start with that out and then bring it in. And actually, I'm going to bring some reverb in just because that's part of the sound as well. And I'll look at the reverb in a minute, but I just think it'll sound a bit nicer with the reverb in there. You hear without that it sounds quite boxy sounding, and with it in you get rid of that boxiness and you get a more snap and you get a bit more low end. So let's try that again. So starting with it out, and then I'll bring it in. So what have I done is I boosted around 2K just to bring out a little bit of the snap of the snare. And I found a frequency which ended up being 270 hertz, which was where the boxiness was. And I pulled that out, quite a tight Q, just to pull that out without killing, you know, all of the tone of the snare. And then I boosted the low end at 120 hertz, quite a bit. And then I put a high pass filter just to pull in that low end. Even though I'd already done it, it just tightened things up a bit. So that's the EQ. Of course, this EQ adds some harmonics as well, which are nice sounding. Next, I've got compression, or the final thing I've got is compression. Final thing on this close snare mic. Now I've got two options here. The one we've been listening to is this one, which is a distressor emulation. I think this is a really good distressor emulation. I've got two other ones, one by Empirical Labs themselves and one from Soft2, but they're both really good. But I find that this one is particularly good at pulling a real smack out of a snare, and I felt that that would be nice with this track to give it the drive that I felt needed to be there in order to really push the thing forward, this particular track. So let's start with this out, and then I'm going to bring it in. So you can hear two things happening here. It's being compressed quite a bit, way too much if you were just hearing that close mic, but because we're only hearing half the snare sound, this is just a component of the snare sound, and I wanted to get that impact to add into the second half of the snare sound, which comes from the overheads, which I'm going to bring in a minute. But I just thought it would be useful for you to hear what I'd done on its own. Now, I wouldn't do it like this on its own. I'd do it in context of the overheads, but I've soloed it here just so you can hear what it actually sounds like. So I'm going to bring in the overheads now, and you can hear what it sounds like with the overheads. And again, I'm going to bring this compressor in and out. I'll start with that out and then bring it in. So you can hear that it's giving it a lot more snap and punch. It's also bringing out the spill quite a bit. And that, when it was mic'd this way, when the snare mic was not that close to the snare, and so it's really, the positioning of the mic was far from ideal. It's really picking up a lot. It's picking up the toms, it's picking up the overheads quite a lot. So I had to kind of balance that. And I think in the context of the song, when you've got everything, it sounds good. But it is a balance, it is a compromise. I could pull back on that and you'd hear less of that being brought up. But I think in context, it sounds good. But I've got other options and we can experiment. So let's bring in the bass for a bit of context. So you can hear, in the context of the rest of it, that it bringing up that background information is not really a problem. But it gives it a much smoother, more controlled sound, so you can really, it sits nicely with the piano. You can hear all of the details. It's not kind of jumping out too much. But yet you can hear all of the details, and it retains a lot of its dynamics because the overheads are not being compressed. and it's getting the dynamics from the overheads, but it's getting the snap and the punch and the body from the close mic, and those two are working together. So we can experiment with this. I'm going to move the release so you can hear what difference that makes. What a difference it makes. It brings out way more of the tone of the snare, but it does also bring out more of that background spill. So I would like more tone and ring from the snare, but because of all the spill, that's why I was saying there's some limitations. I can't just pull this release faster to bring out the tone of the snare, which is what that faster release is going to do, without bringing out too much spill. But there's another way. So I'm going to bring in this split EQ, and what this does, if you're not familiar with this plugin, is it allows you to EQ just the sustain part or just the transient part of a sound. So what I've done here is I found the tone, the ringing frequency of the snare, and just boosted just the tone part of it, not the transient part of it. So it's only bringing up the tone, the ring after the snap, after the hit, the bit after the hit, the ringing part. I've also done a cut here because I found that by bringing that up, it was kind of bringing up some of the boxiness with it, a bit of mud. So I pulled down here. So let's have a listen to this in and out. Might be hard to hear with everything else going on, so I'm just going to pull out the piano. Let's see if we can do that again. Fairly subtle effect because there's not a huge amount of tone on that snare, not a huge amount of ring anyway, but it is bringing out the tone in the ring. So that's an option. Another option I've got here is a different compressor. So this is a different compression approach. I'm achieving a similar thing with the way I've set the compressor up, but you'll hear the difference between using the distressor and this one. So I'm going to bring in this. I'll start with it out and then I'm going to bring it in. So it's got no compression, and then it's going to bring in the chandler. So another approach, I think I prefer this approach for this kind of music. The other one, I think it's nice for other music, maybe slightly more rocky approach, a little bit more processed, a little bit more kind of clamped, more than I would for this kind of music. But this one, I think it's a little subtler, but it still brings a lot of snap and punch to the snare without bringing up as much of that background. But it's still bringing up those ghost notes nicely. So I think this is working really nicely on the snare. I mean, I think the other one sounds good too, but I think this one is probably what I'd go for on a track like this. But I thought it was worth showing the the slightly more extreme approach, just so you can hear what it's like. And I think on some tracks that would be exactly what you'd want to do. On something a little bit more rocky, on something like this, it's jazzy and more acoustic, I'd go for something more like this. But you can hear it's doing a similar kind of thing. I'm going to now just again play with the release on this so you can hear the difference. You can hear how when I slow it down, it has a lot less tone. It pulls the tone out of the snare a bit, and that's because it's not recovering after the compressor being triggered by the snare hit. It's not coming up and bringing that tone up. It's staying down for longer, which can help increase the impact of a snare. But for something like this, I don't think it sounds anything like as good. You want that tone to come up and you want those ghost notes to come up. And when I made it faster, it was bringing more tone out and it was bringing the ghost notes up more, maybe a little bit too much, which is why, you know, in the end I had it sort of fast but not, you know, super fast. So now the final bit of polish is adding this in here, which I'll add in with the context of the piano as well, I think, on the drum bus. So let's hear with and without. So just a nice extra bit of polish, just kind of gluing the drums, and it's also reacting with the snare, as you can hear, and it's just giving it a little bit more smoothness to the snappiness of it, which I like. But it sounds fine without, but I quite like that little bit of extra polish on the drum bus. So I hope you found this useful and interesting. If you did, please do give the video a like and subscribe, and see you next time.